Hello everyone, thank you very much for having me. How is the audio in the back? Can you hear me? It's okay? Great. Okay, so my name is Brooke. I am a psychologist. I did a master's in clinical psychology. Most of my work in private practice is with children, but as a consequence of that I'm working with parents and families and sometimes extended families in that capacity. So I've got a question for everybody to start the presentation today. And it's based on a scientific discovery, and that is that scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory and makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and lowers food cravings. It protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and the flu. It lowers your risk of heart attacks and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Who's interested? Good, we have some hands up. So I'm here to talk about sleep and sleep improvement and the things we can do to maximise the positive outcomes that are a consequence of good quality sleep. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what drives us to sleep. So why do we sleep? We know that there's rest, we know it's important, but what are the biological drives that help us go off to sleep? So firstly, there are two biological drives. First is sleep pressure, and this refers to the fact that the longer you're awake, the more tired you become. You actually build up hypnotoxins in your system that make you feel sleepier, and eventually you will fall asleep. And sometimes, when people are really sleep deprived, this can happen in really dangerous kind of situations, that people fall asleep at the wheel of a car. Adults are a little bit different from children. If anyone has had children, has grandchildren, you might know, you might have seen when children become overtired, their behaviour changes quite dramatically. They sometimes become really hyperactive. We don't tend to do that as adults, we just get more and more tired and then eventually we sleep. So that's sleep pressure. So that's about being tired enough in order to go to sleep. The second biological drive for sleep is our circadian rhythm. This is our body clock. Has anyone here travelled to a different time zone? Yeah, okay, lots of no.
I'm in a different place.
You are in a different time zone, so you might be experiencing this currently, although the time difference between Adelaide and Singapore is not so great, not so great. But our circadian rhythm is our body clock, and this is very tightly woven and connected to sunlight. So, if we didn't have electricity, we would wake when the sun rises. The sun suppresses our melatonin, which is our sleepy hormone. We are alert, hopefully, depending on the quality of our sleep. We're alert during the day. We actually have a dip in our level of alertness at around 3-ish, and then we sort of perk up typically into the evening. Then the sun sets and our melatonin production increases and helps us to feel sleepy. So when we have these two biological mechanisms working together, that we are tired enough to go to sleep, and we are used to falling asleep at that time, as in our body clock is set to that time, things work nicely, they work well. When we are jet lagged, where our body clock is set to a different time zone, that's where we run into problems. We might be waking at 3 in the morning, physically very tired, but awake because our brain, is anyone getting that squeak? Our body's tired, but our brain is wired to be awake at that time because it's still set to that time zone. So they're the two biological drives to sleep. There is a third psychological component to this, and that is if we are experiencing a strong psychological state, a strong emotional state, it's hard to go to sleep. And we see this, think of children on Christmas Eve. They might be tired, they might be used to falling asleep at that time, but they're excited, so they will not go to sleep. The same happens for us as adults if we are really stressed, if we're really angry. So imagine that you are driving home from a party and it's after your bedtime, so you have that sleep pressure there. You're tired enough to go to sleep. You're used to being asleep at that time. And as you're driving home, a dog runs across in front of your car and you have to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting the dog. At that point, you're likely to be flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones, so suddenly you're not feeling calm. And you might find that in that sort of situation, you take longer to fall asleep. The other thing I'll mention about our body clock and our circadian rhythm and this link with melatonin and the sunlight is the light from screens does the same sort of thing. So any kind of blue light from televisions, laptops, iPads, phones, it mimics the effects of the sun and is basically giving the message to our brain that it's daytime and it's time to be asleep. So we're seeing more and more problems with this as a society. Our reliance on or involvement with screens becomes a really big part of our life. We need different things from sleep. We need to have the quantity that is right for us, and that does vary from person to person. We need the sleep that we're getting to be of a good quality, and so that is consecutive. So even though as an adult we might say around about 8 hours is often ideal, you can't have 4 hours, get up and do a whole lot of stuff, go to work, do some things, and then go home and have another 4 hours. It doesn't work like that. We need it to be as continuous as possible. I'll show you a little hypnogram in a minute what sleep architecture looks like, because there's different phases of sleep, different cycles. Basically, we have REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. People are probably a little bit aware of it. I feel like sleep in general is getting more attention in the media as people are becoming aware of the importance of this. REM sleep is when we dream. Our eyes move around under our eyelids, which is why it's called rapid eye movement sleep. And when I do this presentation to kids at school, I ask them to turn to their partner and one of them close their eyes and move your eyes around underneath and see what that looks like, but you don't have to do that. But it's very obvious, and if anyone has any grandchildren who are very little, if you watch them when you're sleeping, you often can see this, because newborn babies in particular have a huge amount of this dream sleep. So our dream sleep, our REM sleep, is really important for learning and memory. A lot of newly learned information is consolidated. It's also really important for processing emotional information. So there's some great research showing the importance of dreams for basically the emotional first aid for us. So that might explain why, if we've had a troubling or challenging experience, you might find that sometimes in your dreams you kind of visit this, and we think this is kind of an emotional processing of these events, where you kind of sort through it in your sleep, emotional first aid. As we learn more about neurobiology, I think we'll find out some really fascinating things in this area. So that's REM sleep, that's our dreams. Then we have non-REM sleep. This is stage 1, 2, 3. I'll show you that on a chart in a second. And in these stages of sleep, we're looking at growth, repair, recharge of our cells. Really important for our brain function, flushing of myeloid plaques, important for brain health. Our cells rejuvenate, our endocrine system resets, basically everything recalibrates. So people might have read Matthew Walker's book. He's a neuroscientist. He's written a great book called Why We Sleep. I have it just here if anyone would like to look at it. And he advocates that sleep is the single most effective thing that we can do to reset our brain and body health every day. So we have that opportunity every day to do this. Here's our sleep charts. This is what it looks like. It's kind of like a roller coaster in a kind of blocky way here. But when we go from being awake, when we fall asleep, we first fall into stage 1 sleep, which is quite light. You can wake up quite easily out of stage 1 sleep. If you stay asleep, you progress to stage 2, stage 3, and stage 3 is our deepest sleep. And then we cycle back up into light sleep again, and then we have some dreams. So that's what, I'll just talk really loudly here. Here, the dream sleep is represented here at the top of every one of these kind of roller coaster. So we dream at the top. The other really important thing, big take-home message in this one, is that at the end of every, and can everyone hear me? I'm speaking loudly enough? Okay, great. At the end of every sleep cycle, after we have our bit of our dream sleep, we wake up. So we have a brief arousal. So that might be wake up, pull up a quilt, wake up, roll over, adjust our pillow. If we don't have sleep problems, then hopefully we just fall back to sleep again, and the roller coaster of sleep kind of continues throughout the night. So that's one of the first important take-home messages, because lots of people aren't aware that it's normal for us to have these kind of brief arousals all through the night. So for an adult, that might happen to us 4 to 6 times a night, and you may not remember it, but trust me, it's happening. The other important thing relating to this sleep architecture, this hypnogram, is that we have our deeper sleep at the beginning of the night. That really deep sleep is very restorative, and if you can get that uninterrupted, that's great. So for anyone with young babies or have children, with young babies, as mothers or fathers of these young babies who wake a lot, if you can get that first block of sleep uninterrupted, that means you often can function reasonably okay, even though you're very likely to be up at other points of the night. So the first 3 to 4 hours is when we have this really deep sleep. What else do I need to say? You can also see on the hypnogram here that the periods of dream sleep we have extend as we get closer to the morning. So that's why we're more likely to remember our dreams closer to the morning. Sometimes we might even be aware of waking up out of our dream sleep when we wake. Now, here's where we get techie. So with the QR codes on your table, or you might be able to scan directly from here, but if you scan this, I'm just going to do a quick poll and find out how much sleep everybody's getting. And I won't reveal any results, it'll be entirely confidential. Does that work from there? Okay, great. And it should just take you to a very, very quick survey, and I can see the results here for anyone who would like to take part in this little poll. Working? Great. Okay, so I'm just collecting the responses now. This is great. Okay, is everybody done? I'll give it one more minute. And then I'll show you the National Sleep Foundation's sleep duration recommendations, which is a real mouthful. So I think we're done. Okay, so the results that I can see, 50% of the audience, of the respondents, have between 6 to 7 hours sleep. 33% have 8 to 9. 11% have 4 to 5 hours. And then other 6%. So now I will show you the sleep duration recommendations. So, looking at the adult end of the chart here, adults aged between 26 to 64 years, the recommended range is between 7 to 9 hours every night. Most of the research is pointing to the magic number of 8 and a quarter. But certainly that is the recommended range. You'll see that it might be appropriate in the darker green outside of that. So maybe for some individuals it would be appropriate to have 10 and for some 6. But outside of that we'd say that's not recommended, and where the risk of some of the negative sort of health outcomes might become apparent. For older adults, 65 plus, 7 to 8. So it doesn't change too much. Again, 9 might be appropriate, 5 to 6 might be appropriate, but outside of those ranges, not recommended. So this is a scary chart. This is a scary chart that shows you what happens if we're sleep deprived. We have slower response time, lowered visual discrimination, it affects our alertness, we have increased errors, our problem solving is affected, logical reasoning is affected. I think most people can identify with the fact that when we're tired, our emotional regulation is affected. We become more irritable, we get cross more easily, we see increases in aggression, impaired hand-eye coordination, injuries and workplace accidents. I wanted to tell you a little about some research that has happened in America where, luckily Australian schools aren't like this, but in America in high school, it's very common for school start times to be incredibly early, like between 7 and 8 a.m. Some schools start at 7:30 a.m. But we have really strong evidence that children who sleep longer have better grades. If they're at the higher end of that sleep quantity, they have better grades. So, in certain states in America, they changed the school start times. So, there was a particular state, as a state, they changed the school start time from 7:25 a.m. to 8:30 a.m., increasing the possibility for these teenagers to have more sleep. And what they found was a 212-point increase in their SAT scores. So that is massive in terms of the potential impact for these kids with the kind of university they can attend, the kind of course that they're really accepted into. Really a big impact on that child's life trajectory, so it's really important. Luckily, as I said, we don't have those sort of start times in Australia, and there's recognition of this. And I know Botanic High, for example, their school start time is much later than 8 a.m. They're taking into account some of the natural things that happen for teenagers in delayed sleep shift, which I can talk to later if anyone's interested in that. The other really interesting thing that happened in these states in America where they changed the school start time is that there was up to a 70% decrease in road accidents among teenagers because we didn't have teenagers, tired, sleepy teenagers driving their cars, which is really amazing and really interesting given that when they introduced ABS brakes into the car industry, they thought it was revolutionary because it reduced car accidents up to about a 20 to 25% reduction. So obviously important, revolutionary, but to think that these school start times had such a big impact on both these children's sort of academic outcomes, but also their safety on the roads is really amazing. So now we'll talk about how common sleep disturbance is. So here we go. I've separated it into adults and children. You can see some information there about gender as well. So I have respiratory sleep disorders, so breathing-related sleep obstruction, breathing obstruction, between 8 to 29%, which is greater in males and postmenopausal women. I see lots of kids with behavioural sleep disorders. That would be one of my main kind of areas. Delayed sleep phase, that refers to when your sleep phase has shifted, and this happens naturally in teenagers due to hormonal changes that they, instead of say falling asleep at 9 p.m, you might find there's a natural kind of shift to a later sleep phase, which can be problematic if you're having to get up very early to attend school. And just think about, their functioning at school when they get there, when they're sleep deprived, it can have big impacts on their academic outcomes. Insomnia, so it's quite high, 25 to 30% in adults. Sleep apnea, 40. Shift work is really hard on people's sleeping pattern, and there's a disorder, a recognised disorder relating to that. And I will hopefully have time for some questions at the end. So in families, because that's where the majority of my work is, 40% of families with young children report poor sleep because of their child or children. The behavioural sleep problems that are pretty common include, well, for infants, constant waking, but that's to be expected because babies need to be fed regularly. They also wake regularly because their sleep cycles are so much shorter than ours that they have the propensity to wake a lot more often than we do as adults. So a newborn baby's sleep cycle might be 15 minutes, whereas ours might be 60 to 90 minutes. So you can see the potential for them to wake very often. Toddlers and preschoolers, they might constantly get out of bed, or they might be co-sleeping, and sometimes parents choose to co-sleep, and that's fine, and it's very common throughout the world, but sometimes families find themselves co-sleeping out of necessity, just to try and maximise their opportunity for sleep. For school-aged children, I tend to be working with children more around bedtime separation and anxiety, because for children who are perhaps quite anxious, going to bed and being left in their room is another point of separation, and so that can be really difficult for some kids. Adolescence, so this is where I refer to this delayed sleep phase, and screen use obviously complicates this a little bit. So where they have a natural shift towards eveningness, this can be exacerbated by screen use, where their brain is just getting that message, it's still daytime, and so they're not able to fall asleep at the time they might normally. So this is a little video, this is wax. This is what Dad referred to when I went on the, I didn't go on the 7 p.m. project, but I went into the studio, the 10 studio, and was interviewed about children and sleep. Oh, this may not work because...
Still internet?
Yes, let me see if this can just quickly jump onto my...
Opportunity for more questions.
Yes, I think I won't waste your time if I can't get this to pop up there. So I will leave this for later, but if anyone is interested in watching it, it's on my website. So I spoke to Carrie Bickmore and the rest of the team at the 7 PM project about children and sleep and the sort of things parents can do to avoid sleep problems. Okay, so now for some tips. So this is based on best practice research. It's not just my idea, this is what the research tells us about sleep. So the suggestion is no screens in the hour before bedtime. And I know this can be really hard. And I know that some people fall asleep watching the television every night. And if it's not a problem for you, I'd say, okay, it's not a problem. But if you're finding that it's taking a long time to go to sleep, let me define long time. So on average, sleep onset takes around 10 to 15 minutes. We'd say that is kind of a good period of time for that sleep onset. If it's taking much longer than that, then we might look to some of these sleep hygiene kind of tips. So no screens in the hour before bed. Remove your clock from the bedroom if clock watching is an issue. And this is a very basic kind of insomnia treatment. So that is, get the clock out of the bedroom, because lots of people start doing the mental kind of arithmetic, like, oh, if it's this time, that means I get this many hours and then I have to, and that increases this stress or anxiety, which, remembering back to how we need to be in order to go to sleep, we need to be calm, and this is where this can become a problem. Avoid stimulants, so Coke, caffeine, tobacco, recreational drugs. I'd say avoid recreational drugs completely, but certainly Coke and caffeine and tobacco. Avoid those stimulants, particularly in the afternoon, so that it doesn't impact on sleep onset. There are lots of relaxation techniques you can use to help you get into that calm state so that you can fall asleep. Avoid exercise 1 hour before bed. One of the other thing that happens when the sun sets is the temperature tends to drop. Now that also provides another signal to our body that it is nighttime and to prepare for sleep. Now if we exercise, our body temperature tends to rise, and that can interfere with those sleep processes again. So that's why this advice is to avoid exercise in the hour before bed. Having a bath before bedtime can be really helpful, because when you're, it's relaxing. When you're in a bath, your core body temperature does rise, but when you hop out, it drops quite quickly, and that again reinforces this message and allows those biological drives to sleep. Some more tips. Food consumption at appropriate times, so don't consume lots of food before bed. There are some sleepy snacks. There are some foods that are high in tryptophan that actually can help you feel sleepy. So sometimes if people have had an earlier dinner and they're a little bit peckish as we head towards bedtime, there are actually a sort of a group of foods that can be helpful, useful to consume if you're peckish, that have tryptophan, so again might help us fall off to sleep. So that includes bananas, nuts, often protein kind of rich foods. So if you're really peckish, that might be a good idea to have a look at some of those tryptophan-rich foods. Turkey is one of them. So when people talk about, particularly in America, having a big turkey lunch and then needing to fall asleep, that's what's going on there. Make sure our bedroom is comfortable. So cooler temperature, minimal light. Think of it like a cave, and warmer bedding rather than having a warm room. We definitely sleep better in a cooler bedroom. So fresh air is a nice thing too. This is a bit different from children, particularly very young children who are not as good at regulating their body temperature. So we might find for a newborn baby, for example, a young baby, you might need their bedroom to be slightly warmer than this, but for adults, around 18 to 19 degrees. Try and keep your sleep-wake times as regular as possible. I know this is hard because I personally love a sleep-in, but with my professional hat on, I know it's actually better to wake at about the same time every day. Not to the minute, but probably within half an hour is ideal to regulate that sleep-wake cycle. If you need to nap, which is fine, do it strategically. Try and keep it to a maximum of 20 minutes, and ideally around 3 or 4 p.m, or probably 3 to 4 p.m, and capitalise on this natural dip in our alertness, in our circadian rhythm that we have at that time. Does anyone remember those great ads that used to be on television about 3:30itis, and they had these people sort of doing kind of crazy things because they were in a bit of a zone? That's exactly what that's about. And I think, I can't remember what those ads were even advertising. Is it chocolate or something? Because that's often what we do at about 3:30. We want chocolate or a coffee or something to help us increase our level of alertness again. There are some great resources that are easily available. The Sleep Foundation, Sleep Health Foundation, is a great resource. And the Australasian Sleep Association has a great website with lots of really interesting and practical, sensible kind of suggestions. The other great resource, I think, is Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. It's really interesting, it's easy to read, it's not all academic and full of stats, but it presents some really fascinating information about where they've made changes and the kind of outcomes. There's some really interesting info in there about athletes and the impact of sleep on athletic performance. Now, any questions for me?
One second. Stephen, you can.
I think it's a microphone.
No, Stephen.
No
One second.
microphone?
No, 1 second. Stephen is going to make an announcement. There was a time. Yes. There's not time for too many questions.
Yeah. I think that everyone's really enjoyed the presentation. Brooke is not in a hurry. The chauffeur or Uber driver is not in a hurry, as yours truly. I think everyone's enjoyed the presentation. I haven't yet seen that video clip from Carrie Bickmore. Interestingly, Brooke went to a function yesterday with Carrie's niece, cousin, another Brooke Bickmore, whose parents have been great friends of ours for many, many decades. Brooke, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. I've got two things here for you. Firstly, the Rotary Club Adelaide does acknowledge and, on behalf of you as guest speaker, in the form of certificate of appreciation, we make a donation today to a Rotary Community of Youth project. So thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much. And we are also giving away guest speakers in this Rotary year something that might be very helpful in your clinic. Yeah. I personally found the presentation really interesting. It's the first opportunity Danny and I have had to hear Brooke present in any sort of format. Brooke is also the mother of 4 young children, and she's now got a teenage son, and 2 boys, 2 girls, including Dulcie, who's so Brooke has got a lot of personal experience that she can take into her clinic. I'm not too sure that she's always mastered the sleep issues that some of her patients may have, but I think she has done a pretty good job, and we're very blessed. Anyway, thank you very much, Brooke.